And we bring in our good friend, the fedora-wearing Jon Hudson, for the Unbiased UFO Report, as we are going to kick things off with a little UFO talk here. Jon, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm having a great night. We had a great guest with Nomar Slavik, and wow, this guy, his stories that he told and the emotions, it was a great night of radio for us. Great
Yeah,
night of
no,
radio.
yeah, no, totally agreed. No, totally agreed. No, and he was a cool guy, but it was fun listening to him, and it was a nice kind of fresh take on things. I really enjoyed it.
Me too, my friend. Me too. And for you, your evening?
Oh, doing good, doing good. I spent much of it enjoying the show, and the rest of it hanging out with my beautiful, awesome, brilliant little daughter. So doing fun.
Oh, that's a good night. That's
Yep,
a
yep, yep.
good night. Anytime we could do that. All right, let's get right to it, my friend. Because 2022 could be turning into the turning point of UFOs. What do you think's going on here?
Well, the thing is that this article, and I was just pulling it up because I wanted to check something on it again, and the thing that's interesting about this is that, um, okay, so to me, like, this is probably a debate that a lot of people are having right now, or a lot of people maybe had in December, right? Just like, hey, what's 22 going to bring to this community or to this movement or whatever you want to call it? But what really surprised me was the fact that a writer from space.com was writing it, and this was not a quick little piece. This is actually a pretty well thought out, story that um, doesn't once again, because this is essentially written for normal folks, right? For any of us who are in this field, who are doing research, a lot of this information that you're going to get, is essentially old news to you, right? But it essentially goes through, and it talks about some of the evidence. It specifically has a line that it calls out in the beginning, saying that interest in UFOs continue to grow, both among scientists and government officials. So right off the very beginning of the article, they're trying to establish credibility, that what they're talking about here are well thought out, even minded, well educated people that have professional backgrounds that are coming to these conclusions. So they're really trying to set a tone that says that, hey, this is official, or this is authoritative in some ways, right? And so it talks about essentially the UFO versus the UAP phenomenon. It even talks about Alpha Centauri. It talks about the UAP movement. It talks about the Navy videos. It talks about a coordinated event, in the National Defense Act and the Gillibrand Amendment. I mean, it does a good job of essentially touching on. I mean, he even goes into a UFO detection and a Muamua. It's a pretty long, well thought out article that even offers some constructive criticism, talking about the lack of coordination, which is obvious. And and it ends with challenges. So it's a well thought out article. I really encourage everyone to read it. I'm kind of surprised that it came out in space.com. It's a well researched article, and even though those of us who are voice researchers may not learn anything in it, I highly recommend you read it because it's got some good information in it, and it's a good thing to share with other people.
Well, you know what? I encourage people to read it too. One of the things that I found is once again it's a very scientific type article. If you are looking for that type of information, it doesn't get into a lot of experiencers or anything. But the fact that space.com is taking this story and not with a grain of salt. There was no anecdotes, there was no puns, there was
Mhm.
no, shots over the bow that a lot of people like to make fun of this topic. I
It was
liked
like a
that about
normal article. It was like
yeah.
it was like an article you'd see about a real topic, right? Right. I mean,
No,
I hate to
very
phrase
true.
it that way, but that's how that's kind of how. I mean, I think that's what you're referring to, and I completely agree.
You know, I mean, y- there's not a lot of new information it's a lot of recycled information, but
Mhm.
the fact that space.com is carrying it, I think that's the weight of the story, John.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that I want more mainstream periodicals to look at all the research that folks like us do as a buffet, and go ahead and pick through that buffet and pick the items that you think are going to have the most impact to your reader base, and use that information. And to me, that's the right way to do it. And so I encourage every mainstream, publication out there to basically pour through all of our research and just grab what you think will be passionately, appreciated by your readers.
Absolutely. Did anything catch you off guard in that article?
I would say I was a little surprised that they brought up detection. I would say that's the only thing that kind of like gave me kind of a second take. I was like, and it wasn't that there was anything significant written about detection, but I was just I was kind of like just going through the list and like, wait, detection. That's a more aggressive, you know, outbound sort of procedure. So that surprised me. Yourself?
And one of our former guests, Dr. Michael Masters, professor of anthropology at Montana Tech University, says the
Yes.
human time traveler's model to explain UFOs has been gaining traction over the last couple of years. And he says, I think people are starting to realize that this makes a lot of sense in the context of how these ships operate, how they can achieve such incredible accelerations and decelerations if they are manipulating space time in their own reference frame in and around these craft. And if we can take seriously the descriptions of beings seen in association with them, how they are ubiquitously described in such human terms regarding their behavior, technology, and morphological form. I mean, what Michael is saying here, and Michael's a big fan of this show, he is basically
And
saying,
I'm a
look,
big fan of his too. I love
yeah,
his theory
me
about time
too.
travel and abductions. Yeah.
But what he's saying here, John, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is look, we see the spaceships. We need to know what's inside. Who's controlling that? And if there are beings controlling this, how are they doing it? Where are they from? And we got to start looking into this aspect that we could be being visited
Oh,
by an extraterrestrial presence.
oh, you're just all those kids that wanted to open your presents early. Can't you just wait and be surprised? Sorry. I
No,
know. I mean, no. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
no, you
no. I mean, I
jerk,
mean, I mean,
no.
I, no. I mean, the thing is that, and the problem is that you start talking about what we're talking about now, and it's fun, but it leads to a darker aspect, which is what is the intent, right? What is the intent that these guys actually have, right? So it's yeah. I mean, I know I agree with him. I think it's a very challenging issue.
All right, let's move on to topic number 2 tonight, which is Linda Moulton Howe appeared on Kurt J. Mungall's Theory of Everything. And I'm a little, it doesn't surprise me that Kurt J. Mungall, who's a great podcaster, by the way, on Theories of Everything, you can sign up for him on YouTube. What surprises me is how few interviews Linda Moulton Howe has been doing, and the fact that she finally, yes, she has her own YouTube channel, she does her own studies and interviews, everything like that, but she's not interviewed by a lot of people these days. She's kind of pulled back from that scene.
Yes, and perhaps we saw some indication of why. Because essentially, I thought it was a very good interview. I you know I will say this, that because of Linda's style, it forced Kurt to completely alter his style. Kurt, one of the things I love about him is that he's a quick thinker, and so he typically kind of gets his firing back and forth. Linda is a kind of a long-winded, verbose sort of creature, and so she gave these incredibly thoughtful answers to things. But what it meant was that Kurt wasn't able to get in his kind of normal, 10,000 questions in, right? And but it went well. I mean, it went really well, and I thought she gave really good answers, and it was all going fine. And then it's like toward the very end of the interview, she mentioned that her battery was going to die, and so he tried to get her to change batteries and come back, but she said it'd been 2.5 hours, and she was tired, and so he's like, okay, well, how about 3 more questions, and she's like, well, 1 more question. He's like, okay, fine, and he asked a question, unfortunately, from Steve Cambrian, whatever his name is, from Truth Seekers. And it was and I was a little worried because it was his standard kind of try to poke the bear sort of approach, where he basically said that he found some photograph on her website that had been lifted from a video game, and he told her about it, and she never removed the picture from the website, and he wanted to know why, right? And so it's like, really, this is like the appropriate time to be asking that question. But anyway, she said that she didn't know what he's talking about, and which is probably true. And he said, you know what, that's fine, let's just move on to another question. So he gets on to the next question, and unfortunately, I think that question and the negotiation to keep her on for this last question kind of put her into a kind of a bit of a defensive mindset. And the next question actually came from unidentified celebrity review guys, and that was it was basically, I'm misquoting it, but it was something along the lines of for retractions that you've for any retractions you've had to make in the past, can you tell us about one of them, right? And and you word that correctly, and I think that's a really fine question to ask someone. Hey, can you tell us some time in the past where like something you really believed in just didn't end up working out, and then you had to deal with it. Like, how did you deal with it, right? Like, to me, like, that's a pretty reasonable question to ask. The way Kurt asked the question, and just because of the flow, she took real offense to it, and she got angry, and there was a very uncomfortable exchange, and they were both very professional and respectful of each other, but it was clear that she felt that he was trying, that she indicated that she felt that he was trying to catch her in something, that he was trying to get her in something, like to trick her into saying something. And she was very upset, and the interview ended, and a lot of people said the interview ended early, and that wasn't the case, because they were on their last question, so the interview was going to end anyway. And so that didn't really matter, but it was unfortunate that it ended on such a negative tone, and it was unfortunate that Kurt was Kurt took it pretty hard. He felt pretty bad about it, and because the last thing he wants is to make a guest feel like they're being attacked, and it was unfortunate the way the whole thing played out. But up until that last 5 minutes, it was an excellent interview.
Did she say anything new about Antarctica or about what's going on with Art's parts that she sold?
So she gave a few little tiny data points along the lines of TTSA and the CRADA that basically basically back up my hypothesis that I shared with you, that we got feedback on, and basically that and I mean, she basically phrased it a different way, but what I think will be interesting for people to listen to is she talks about the fact that there was all these attempts to be able to generate terahertz, the right level of terahertz radiation, or terahertz frequencies, and essentially there were several people that thought they could pull it off, and in the end, all the private options failed, and it was the Army lab that did have the terahertz equipment, and so that was one of the main reasons why the parts went to the Army, was for that. But Linda, because she was so worried about getting the parts back because of the Army being involved, that's why she forced it to be a sale where she sold the parts as opposed to lending it, because she assumed that since the Army was now involved, she'd never get the parts. She would never get the parts back. So that's the whole reason why that she requested payment for it. Yeah. But essentially, it wasn't anything specifically new. But it was nice. It was nice to get some details fleshed out. And so me personally, I have a much clearer picture of the story. And I didn't have confirmation that the parts that the army was looking at were some of the same arts parts that she had.
Wow. Wow. Did she keep any of that arts parts for herself?
Yeah, no, she did, because basically all the with the exception of that the small piece that went to the army, every other piece has been specifically lent and had to be returned. So, with the exception of a few small bits that she's given away over the years, the majority of that piece she still possesses. I mean, some of it's loaned out at the moment, but I don't know if this was this. The problem is that I don't. I'll be honest here. I don't follow Linda very closely because I've had challenges with some of her sources
Right.
in the recent years, and so I don't know the exact details of how it played out. Yeah.
Now, John, you bring up an interesting part here because, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of podcasts out there dealing with everything from cryptids to consciousness to UFOs and aliens and ghosts and paranormal, everything that you could think of. But you brought up a point on one from recently this week where you mentioned the tone of it can really turn an interview sour. Give us the breakdown.
Yeah, so this was another case of our friends over Celebrity Review that were involved, and they did what was for the most part a good interview of John Ramirez, and there was another gentleman involved, and I apologize, I don't remember what his name was off the top of my head, but and essentially, and keep in mind that Michael, oh
Mataluni?
man, Mataluni, thank you. Is out for now. So he wasn't there. And so basically, it should have been. I mean, that that channel is known for being a safe place, right? A safe place for people to go where they're not going to feel attacked, And essentially, I have no idea what was going on. I'm really baffled by what happened, but for some reason, the tone that Rather was using was very acidic, and it was uncomfortable, and uh, and John reacted to it, and it got a little confrontational, and it was awkward, and it was hard to listen to, and it was the sort of thing where it was like the first like 40 minutes of it are awkward and hard to listen to. And finally, others jump in and they kind of get control of the interview again, and the problem is if you listen to what was asked, I need to go through it again, but the last I looked at it, I couldn't pick out any words that Rather used that were wrong, or any question that he asked that should have been seen as out of bounds necessarily, right? I really believe and this is my personal analysis. I really believe that it was his tone that was the issue, and so the problem is that now, so there was a lot of negativity thrown toward the show because of how this played out. You can see it in the comments and so forth. They had to do damage control in that they then very shortly afterwards came out with another show where they do analysis of their own show. And so there was definitely an attempt to get out in front of it. And to a certain degree, toward the end of the interview, they were kind of laughing about it a little bit and trying to kind of lighten the mood a little bit, because there's no reason for it to be all, serious and everything, right? I mean, some people just have off days, right? I mean, it's like it could rather could have just been having a bad day. I mean, who knows, right? But the point was that this was I mean, John Ramirez has not done many interviews. He's not going to do probably a whole lot of interviews. I believe his next interview is on Coast to Coast, and so it was cool for them to get him, and they basically they kind of blew the interview in a way, very much. I mean, for a lot of people they did, and it and it's really unfortunate because some people are going to read into what the questions were, and I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think it was all tone. I really do. I think it was all tone. But I'd love to hear what other people think.
There's a difficult task in doing an interview. I mean, for the majority of podcasters out there, they aren't professional broadcasters. All right. And they are doing this because they love the topic. And it doesn't matter what the topic is, whether it's UFOs or sports or baking or how to fix a car. All right. There's millions of podcasts out there and YouTube channels for everybody who just wants to have a voice. And that's the beautiful part of the entire social media medium. And at times when you don't know how to interview someone, or an interview goes bad, and we've had them go bad on this show. The big thing that you always have to remember is the majority of the people here have secondary lives. The ones that pay their bills, the ones that are paying the rent, putting food on the table before you can get home and potentially live a dream of making it in broadcasting one way or another. Some have that dream. The majority just like to do it for a hobby and be a part of something that is special to them. And I think that is perfect, but on the flip side, this is where, you've heard me go off on a number of times, and I'm not blaming Rather or Lou or Mike at UCR. Those are good people over there.
Oh yeah, and they work hard, and they put on a good show. Yeah.
They put on a very good show, and like you said, they've never been a type of group to ruffle their feathers. And as I go forward, I will also say that we were very blessed to be asked to take part in their last Big Phone Home 2 that they did for UAP disclosure. And we've developed a real kinship and friendship with that show. And the point that I'm getting at when I go through this is, knowing those guys, it was probably a bad day. But the problem is, a lot of times many people in the audience, and not to throw direction at the audience or blame at the audience, because you need a great audience in order to have a great show. But sometimes there are audience members out there who take things the wrong way, and the line of questioning the wrong way, and it affects what we're doing here.
Oh, it really does. Oh, for sure. Oh, no, it really does. It really, really does. Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't see the episode. I heard about it. I read about it on Twitter. And, I felt bad for Lou Jimenez and Rather having to go on the defensive on Twitter. They really had to go on the defensive. And unfortunately, that goes with the line. That goes with the line. If you want to have a credible show, sometimes you're going to piss people off.
Well, and the thing is that people need to listen to it, because, like, for example, for me, like when I heard about it, when I went to listen to it, I wasn't expecting much, and I got to be honest with you, I was surprised. There was 2 or 3 times where something Rather said something, I was like, I was shocked. I have to admit that. But the flip side is that I heard that the Theory of Everything interview went really bad too, and I listened to that one, and that wasn't anywhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be, right? So it's also, people need to judge these things on their own, right? But my concern is that it is still probably just like a bad day or something, right? And we all have them, and maybe we all need to get better at calling ourselves out and not doing stuff when we're in that state, you know. But the thing is that people are going to read into the fact that it might have been the questions that were asked that that Ramirez somehow doesn't want to answer, and they're going to do what you said. They're going to read too much into it, and it probably had nothing to do with it. It probably just was a bad day.
Could have been. Finally tonight, Salvador Pay going to be interviewed by Kurt.
I know. I can't believe.
For people who don't know who Salvador Pay is, give us a breakdown.
Yeah, so basically, he's the one that basically wrote those papers, and basically, so the Navy patents that everyone has heard so much about, the Payas effect is what he coined. He's been interviewed a couple, kind of indirectly, and I don't think he's ever been interviewed live. I could be wrong on that. He's been a difficult person to interact with, partially because of his lack of interest, partially because he still has an active role, and essentially, he's the one that basically is the author of those 3 Navy patents, the ones on a low inertial, basically all this really, really cool stuff, right? And essentially, and the thing is that based on my knowledge of how a lot of this stuff works, his hypothesis is it's not out of the blue. It's derivative of a lot of previous work that was headed in this direction, and the thing is that, but a lot of people think the patents are complete BS, and a lot of people will call them out as BS. And the patent office pushed back on them. The CIO of the Navy had to jump in and say, no, look, we've tested this. We have prototypes. We've shown this, right? And so, there's a lot of people that just don't believe in these patents, which to me is a shame for him, because personally, what I've read through them, I actually think he's on to something. And so basically, and also this is a very interesting individual in that essentially he had a role within the Navy research when he did this work. Then he moved into Air Force, and then he moved out of Air Force into Space Force. So now he's with Space Force. And so essentially Kurt landed a freaking interview with him. And so I don't have anything to report other than that, but I'm really, really, really excited, aside from the fact that it's him, but the fact that Kurt is the one interviewing him means that it's going to be a very technical interview. And what Kurt said is that it's his intention. And he said, I don't know if I'll have time to do this. He goes, but it's his intention to go through those patents with a fine-tooth comb with Salvador on the, there with him. And if he can pull that off, that would be outstanding.
Well, good luck to him for that, because that is not only a very difficult subject, but as talented as Kurt J. Munkle is, he does struggle with the UFO stuff a little bit, especially experience.
Yes, yeah. But this will essentially be a physics talk. So it's going to be technical, but it should be, if it happens, with bells on, it's going to be good stuff. I'm looking forward to it.
Anything juicy in there, in those patents?
Yeah, essentially, look, let's go on the assumption. Okay, let's just go on the assumption that that everything in there is either real, or it's close enough to real that it was reasonable to assume that those things would be available in the next 5 to 10 years, right? And let's assume that what he's talking about is basically room temperature semiconductors. He's talking about the ability to basically take a ship down. It's amazing the stuff that he's he's pulling off. I mean, to me, it's just, and once again, to me, like the whole idea of essentially having a dual hull ship with, with this metamaterial in it, is very akin to what we've been hearing going back all the way to, God, you even go back to the TR3B stuff with that gentleman that did that interview, that where all that stuff came from. I mean, this is all very inline stuff. But what we're talking about is an incredibly high powered, low footprint fusion design. So basically, something that produces energy, something that reduces your initial inertia, which basically is what keeps you from getting squished, and then the ability to have a transmedium hull. And he basically nails like the 5 observables in 3 patents.
That sounds interesting. Very interesting. Jon, thank you for a very educational UAP report tonight.
Always
really
my
do
pleasure. Thank you
appreciate
everyone
it,
for
buddy.
sticking around. Yep.
Oh,
Good
always
stuff.
love to have you here.